The cane fields burned like a second sun. Smoke swallowed the stars, and the air reeked of sugar turning to ash. Rain hissed against the flames, but the fire only screamed louder. Drums throbbed from the hills, a heartbeat in the dark. Shadows moved, dozens, then hundreds. Machetes glinting like fangs in the firelight. The crack of chains snapping rang out sharp as gunfire. A woman's voice rose in song, half lullaby, half curse. Screams answered her. The night had split open, and in that wound a revolution was born. Morning broke with no mercy. The sky was already white with heat, and the cane fields shimmered like endless blades of glass. Men bent low under the stalks, sweat dripping from their backs, chains clinking with each step. The overseer's whistle cut the air, sharp and cruel. Etienne Moreau rode between the rows on horseback, a thin man with a whip coiled like a serpent in his hand. His coat smelled of rum always. He tapped the flask at his belt with his finger whenever he grew impatient. "Faster," he barked. "The sun doesn't wait for lazy dogs." A young boy stumbled in the mud. Moreau dismounted, slow and deliberate. His boots crunched on the dry earth. "You think this land will forgive you?" he hissed, lifting the whip. "This land devours the weak." The whip cracked. The boy's cry was swallowed by the endless hum of cicadas. From the roadside, a woman watched. Her name was Claudine. She carried baskets of oranges to the market, her steps light but her eyes heavy. She never spoke much, but everyone knew she listened. She had a face carved by silence and hands stained with the juice of fruit she sold. "Hard lesson," Moreau sneered, glancing at her. Claudine's eyes didn't flinch. She adjusted the weight of her baskets. "It isn't the boy who will pay for your cruelty," she said softly. "It's you," Moreau spat into the dust. Words from a market witch. "Better watch your tongue, Claudine, before I cut it out." She turned and walked away, her song humming low in her throat, half prayer, half warning. Moreau cursed, but her voice carried on the wind, threading itself between the stalks of cane. This was Saint-Domingue, jewel of the Caribbean. French sugar, French gold, French pride. For every jewel, 1,000 broken backs. For every glass of rum, a river of blood. The colony fed empires, but its own people starved. In the market, Claudine laid her oranges on the stall. Her voice was low, but people leaned close to hear. "They talk of France," she whispered. "A revolution? Heads falling in Paris. Liberty, they call it." The others hushed, fear in their eyes. "Liberty," she repeated, slicing the word like a knife. "It is coming here. Sooner than they think." Back in the fields, Etienne Moreau mounted his horse again, muttering curses. He could feel the weight of her words even as he cracked his whip once more. Chains rattled. Men bent lower. But in the silence between the lashes, hope stirred like a secret fire. The day dragged on, hot and merciless. Yet in the corners of Saint-Domingue, in markets, in huts, in the whispers of the enslaved, a storm was already gathering. The nights in Saint-Domingue were never silent. Crickets hummed, drums whispered in the distance, and chains rattled with every restless turn of the enslaved. It was in those nights that stories were born, and 3 children carried the weight of them all. Toussaint was born on the Breda plantation. He was small, quick-eyed, his hands always restless on the reins of the horses he tended. The other slaves laughed, called him Little Spartacus. He never laughed back. Instead, he hid beneath the stables with a torn leather book stolen from his master's son. He traced the words with his finger, not fully knowing them, but sensing power in every letter. One night, an older stable hand found him whispering the words aloud. "You'll get whipped for that, boy," the man warned. Toussaint closed the book and looked up with steady eyes. "Then I'll learn faster. So they never catch me." The man shook his head, but he saw something in the boy's gaze. Not fear, fire. Jean-Jacques grew in the cane fields, his childhood stolen before it began. He carried scars across his back like a second skin. Each scar was a story. The whip sang his lullabies. When he was 10, he watched his mother dragged away in chains. He never saw her again. That night, sitting by the fire, he pressed his fingers over the raw flesh on his back. His friend Henri leaned close, whispering, "One day we'll tear their whips apart." Jean-Jacques clenched his fists. "No, one day they'll feel it." The firelight glowed on his scar, a mark that would never fade. Marie Claire's world was different. She was born in the kitchen, raised among pots of stew and jars of herbs. Her mother was a healer, known for lullabies that soothed wounds as much as the salves she mixed. Marie Claire wore a necklace of bone, a gift from her mother. each bead carved with a symbol. When soldiers raided the huts one evening, her mother pressed the necklace into her hand. "Sing when you're afraid," she whispered. "The song carries strength." That night, Marie-Claire sat by the embers humming. Her song was fragile, but it carried. Even the overseer paused, listening before snarling and walking on. Years later, she still hummed that tune, the bones at her neck clicking softly with each breath. These 3 children lived different lives, yet their fates were braided like rope. A boy with a book, a boy with scars, a girl with a song. Each carried something the masters could never chain. By day they bent their backs beneath the sun. By night they dreamed. Toussaint of freedom written in words, Jean-Jacques of vengeance carved in blood, Marie-Claire of voices lifted in song. In their hearts the fire already burned. All it needed was air. The fields of Saint-Domingue hid more than sweat and blood. Beneath the cane, secrets moved like roots, feeding those who dared to dream. Toussaint grew into a man of quiet patience. He still cared for horses, his hands strong on the reins, his eyes sharper than any overseer realized. One night, as he rubbed down a mare, a shadow stepped into the stable. The old man carried the smell of earth and smoke. His name was Macandal. His hands were stained green from herbs, and his pouch rattled with vials. "You read the white man's words," Macandal said softly. Toussaint stiffened. "I don't," the old man raised a finger. "Don't lie. Words can be poison or cure. You must learn which is which." Toussaint studied him. "Why are you telling me this?" Macandal smiled with teeth missing. "Because I see you, boy. You're not meant to ride horses. You're meant to ride storms." From that night, Macandal taught him more than books. Roots that killed, powders that cured, whispers of rebellions long past. Every vial he touched became a lesson. Freedom was not begged for. It was brewed, plotted, won. Elsewhere, Jean-Jacques trained his anger like a blade. Henri never left his side, a boy with quick wit and quicker hands. Henri carried a carved wooden talisman, always rubbing it for luck. "You hold that thing like it's magic," Jean-Jacques teased one evening. "It is," Henri shot back. "It keeps me alive when you're ready to fight every shadow." Jean-Jacques smirked, but his eyes darkened. "One day it won't be shadows. It will be them. And when that day comes, I won't need luck." Henri laughed, but unease lingered in his smile. Marie-Claire grew into a woman whose voice could still a storm. In the kitchen huts, she sang as she mixed herbs, her necklace of bone clinking like a drum. She healed wounds with poultices, soothed crying children with song, and in the quiet corners she found something else: love. Armand was a house servant, gentle-eyed, with hands always ink-stained from writing letters for the masters. He had a habit of tapping his quill against the table when he thought. One evening, as he wiped ink from his fingers, he whispered, "They let me read their letters. I know things. Dangerous things." Marie-Claire tilted her head. "Why tell me?" "Because I trust you. And because..." He hesitated, then smiled. "Because your song keeps me alive." Their love was forbidden, fragile as glass, but it glowed. They met in stolen moments, by the well in the shadows of the kitchen. She sang softly, and he traced letters in the dirt, teaching her symbols he was not supposed to share. Together they dreamed of a future neither dared to name, but the world sharpened itself against them. One day at market, Claudine whispered to a group huddled around her oranges. "The whites argue about Paris, a king, a guillotine, freedom for some. But not for us." "Not yet," the crowd murmured. Henri leaned close to Jean-Jacques. "If the whites can take freedom, why can't we?" Jean-Jacques' jaw tightened. "We will." "With blood, not papers," Toussaint overheard. His voice cut in low but firm. "Blood without plan is wasted. Chains don't break from rage. They break from strategy." Henri spat in the dust. "And who made you the master of plans?" Macandal's voice rose behind them, rough but steady. "He's right. Rage burns quick. Strategy burns slow. Together they can set the world on fire." The group fell silent. Even Jean-Jacques' anger cooled, if only for a moment. But shadows of betrayal crept closer. Armand, caught one night carrying scraps of paper with coded marks, was dragged before the overseer. Moreau's whip cracked across his back. He did not confess, but suspicion spread. Some whispered he had endangered them all. Others whispered worse, that he might break under pressure. When Marie-Claire saw him after, bruised and trembling, she pressed her necklace into his palm. "Hold this," she whispered. "Hold it and don't speak their names, not even if they kill you." Armand kissed the bone beads, his eyes wet. For you, I'll stay silent. Bonds were forged, loves were born, oaths were whispered. But in Saint-Domingue, every bond was a chain waiting to be broken, and every oath would soon be tested. The sun hung heavy and the square smelled of sweat and fear. The slaves were ordered to gather, their chains clinking as they shuffled in. Even the children were dragged to the front. At the center stood a man tied to a post. His name was Laurent, young, no more than 20. His crime whispering of freedom. Etienne Moreau paced like a jackal, his whip dangling loose. He spat into the dirt. Let this be a lesson, he said. A tongue that speaks of liberty is a tongue that rots. The crowd murmured, fear and anger mixing like storm clouds. Marie-Claire clutched Henri's arm, whispering, he's just a boy. Henri's jaw clenched. They don't care. They never cared. A drumbeat of hooves broke through the murmurs. Soldiers in bright coats marched into the square, muskets gleaming. At their head rode a man whose presence stilled even Moreau's whip, Colonel Rochambeau. His uniform immaculate, white gloves covering his hands. He sat tall in the saddle, his shadow long across the square. His voice was cold, smooth as polished steel. Proceed, he ordered. The whip cracked. Laurent screamed. The crowd flinched but did not move. Again and again, blood sprayed, soaking the post, running down to the dust. Mercy, someone cried from the crowd. Rochambeau's eyes snapped toward them. His smile was thin, cruel. Mercy? His voice carried like thunder. Mercy is for equals. You are not. The soldiers laughed, the sound sharp and hollow. Jean-Jacques' fists shook. He muttered, one day. Toussaint's voice cut in, steady, low. Not today, watch, remember. The whip cracked again. Laurent hung limp, blood dripping from his back. His head lifted once, eyes glazed, lips moving. Liberty, he whispered. Then the final strike silenced him. His body sagged, lifeless against the post. The square was silent. Only the flies buzzed, drunk on blood. Rochambeau dismounted slowly, boots crunching the earth. He walked to the body, his gloved hand brushing against the blood-stained wood. He looked at the crowd as though inspecting cattle. Remember this, he said softly. This is the price of disobedience. And I promise you, it is cheap compared to what else I can take. He dropped his glove into the blood-soaked dirt, leaving it there like a challenge. Then he mounted and rode away, his soldiers following, muskets glinting in the sun. The crowd dispersed in silence, but their eyes burned with unspoken rage. Mothers held children tighter. Men walked stiff, fists clenched. Behind the huts, Jean-Jacques spat into the dirt. One day we'll answer with fire. Toussaint looked at him, his face unreadable. One day, he said. But not yet. Fire needs air, and we are still suffocating, Henri snapped. How much longer? How many more? Toussaint's gaze was steady. Until we are ready. Marie-Claire's voice trembled. And if we are never ready? Toussaint finally turned, eyes dark as night. Then we will all die in chains. Her song caught in her throat, silenced by the truth of his words. In the distance, Claudine whispered at the market. The blood of the boy will not sink quietly. It will grow roots. It will rise. The whip cracked, the boy died, and Rochambeau smiled. But the silence that followed was not submission. It was the silence of fire waiting for breath. Night pressed down heavy, the air thick with cicadas and the smell of molasses drifting from the mills. In the cane fields, shadows gathered. Men and women moved silently between rows, the moonlight glinting off machete blades half buried in earth. Henri crouched low, whispering. If they catch us here, we hang. Jean-Jacques grinned, though his voice was tight. Then we don't get caught. Marie-Claire's hands trembled as she passed out scraps of cloth. Tie them around your wrists, so in the dark we know who is friend, who is foe. A rustle in the brush made them freeze. Out stepped a giant of a man, shoulders broad as a doorframe, his hair tied back with a strip of red cloth. His voice was deep, rolling like thunder. Fear keeps the masters fat, he said. It starves the rest of us. Enough. Toussaint stepped forward, studying him. Boukman, the man nodded once. You've spoken of fire. I've brought the flame. From behind him, two women emerged, carrying gourds filled with rum and herbs. Their hands smeared symbols in ash across foreheads. A chant rose low, pulsing like a drumbeat beneath the night. Marie-Claire whispered, What are you doing? Boukman's gaze didn't waver, binding us to each other, to the spirits that hear us when no one else does. Henri hesitated, then let the ash mark streak across his brow. If it means we rise, I'll take it. Toussaint's eyes narrowed. Rising is easy. Surviving it is harder. Boukman smiled grimly. Survival without freedom is just slower death. The group circled close, voices hushed. Plans spilled like seeds into the dirt. Which plantations would burn first? Where to strike for weapons? Which masters to kill, and which to leave as warnings? Jean-Jacques leaned in. We start with Moreau. Break him and the others will fear us. Toussaint's voice was sharp. Strike too fast and they'll crush us before we spread. We need precision, not fury. Henri bristled. Precision won't stop the whip. Boukman raised his hand, silencing them. Both are needed. Fire for fear, order for strength. Together they win wars. Suddenly the sound of hooves in the distance, muskets clattering. A patrol. The group scattered into the cane, bodies pressed flat against stalks. Lantern light swept across the fields. A soldier muttered, nothing but rats and shadows. The patrol passed, their laughter fading into the night. Only when the silence returned did they crawl back together. Breath ragged, hearts pounding, Marie-Claire clutched Toussaint's arm. How long do we live like this? Hiding, whispering, waiting? Toussaint looked at her, his voice steady as stone. Until the day we stop hiding. Until the night becomes ours. Boukman raised his machete to the moon. Then let that night be soon. The chant resumed, louder now, rolling like distant thunder. In the darkness, their fear began to turn into something sharper. Resolve. The fields had heard countless screams, countless prayers. But this night they heard something different. A vow. The night they chose was moonless, thick with clouds that smothered the stars. The air tasted of rain and smoke before a single spark was lit. Toussaint stood at the edge of the cane field, silent. His fingers traced the small wooden cross he kept hidden under his shirt. Behind him, men and women knelt, whispers coiling in the dark like snakes. Henri muttered a prayer. Jean-Jacques sharpened his blade against a stone, sparks flying. Marie-Claire tied her hair with the strip of cloth Boukman had given her, crimson against the blackness. Boukman's voice cut the night. When the fire rises, we rise with it. When the blood spills, we drink freedom. A drumbeat began, low, steady, unrelenting. Flames leapt as torches were thrust into dry cane. The fields ignited in seconds, fire racing faster than breath. Screams echoed from the plantation houses as the white masters woke to a sky turned red. Etienne Moreau burst from his veranda, nightshirt flapping, pistol clutched in his trembling hand. Claudine shrieked inside, clutching her pearls as the world burned. Henri's voice roared, "Now!" They surged forward. Blades glinted, torches arced. Chains snapped from wrists and ankles as men swung them like weapons, steel whistling through smoke. Moreau fired into the dark. A man fell, choking on blood. But then Jean-Jacques was on him, machete flashing. Moreau staggered back, pistol dropping. "You dare!" Moreau spat, face twisted with fury. Jean-Jacques pressed the blade to his throat. "We don't dare. We decide." With one stroke, blood sprayed across the veranda rails. Moreau collapsed, choking, his last breath drowned by fire's roar. Inside the house, Claudine screamed. Marie-Claire stormed in, eyes blazing. Claudine backed into a corner, clutching a silver crucifix. "Spare me," Claudine begged. I was kind. I gave scraps, Marie-Claire's voice cut like a whip. "You gave chains," she swung the torch. Curtains caught. Flames devoured the room. Claudine's scream was swallowed as the roof cracked and caved. Outside, chaos spread like a storm. Plantation after plantation ignited. Masters dragged from their beds, some pleading, some spitting curses. A child wailed. Toussaint turned to see a boy no older than 10, pale as bone, staring at the bodies. The boy's father lay split at his feet, his mother dragged screaming into the fire. Toussaint froze. Marie-Claire pulled his arm. "Leave him. He is theirs." But Toussaint's eyes lingered on the child. He whispered, "He will remember." The boy's gaze locked with his, hatred searing even through the smoke. Drums thundered louder. Boukman raised his machete, his voice booming. "Tonight we are no longer slaves. Tonight Haiti begins." The crowd roared, blades lifted to the burning sky. But even as victory sang, the night grew cruel. Gunshots cracked from the hills. French militias, roused by the flames, poured down with muskets and bayonets. Smoke hid the rebels at first, but bullets still tore through the dark. Men dropped screaming. Women dragged the wounded into the fields. Henri cursed. They're coming too fast. Toussaint shouted back, "Scatter!" Live to strike again. Jean-Jacques snarled, eyes wild. Run after all this? Boukman's hand clamped his shoulder. Not run. Spread. Fire spreads faster than men. The rebels split, some fleeing into the cane, others vanishing into the mountains. Still, pockets of fury remained. Henri turned on a soldier, grappling him to the ground, driving a blade into his throat. Blood sprayed his face, his eyes burning with grim satisfaction. The militias fired again. Torches fell. Bodies dropped. The battlefield lit only by fire and fury. Marie-Claire clutched Toussaint's hand as they stumbled through smoke. If they kill us now, all is lost. Toussaint's grip tightened. Then we don't die tonight. Through the chaos, Boukman's voice rang, a chant above musket fire. Chains to ashes. Masters to dust. Rebels echoed him, their cries shaking the burning earth. A musket ball ripped into Boukman's shoulder. He staggered, blood soaking his tunic, but he did not fall. He raised his machete high, blood dripping from his arm. You cannot kill what has already died in chains. The rebels roared. The soldiers faltered for a heartbeat. In that breath, flames leapt higher, devouring fields, barns, houses. The night was painted in red and gold. Smoke blotted the stars. Screams mingled with drums. At dawn, the fields lay in ruin. Corpses scattered among blackened stalks. Houses smoldered, roofs collapsed, walls charred. The air stank of blood and ash. Among the ruins, Toussaint knelt, his cross still in hand. Jean-Jacques limped past, face smeared with soot and blood, laughter hollow in his throat. Henri stared at the rising sun, whispering, "It's begun." Boukman, wounded but unbroken, raised his voice one last time. This is not the end. This is the birth. In that night of fire, the chains of Saint-Domingue cracked. Not broken fully, not yet, but cracked. And through those cracks poured the fury of thousands. A rebellion had spoken its first words, and the world would never silence it again. The sun rose on blackened cane and charred beams. Ash drifted like snow, clinging to skin, to tears, to wounds that would never close. Where laughter and cruelty once echoed in the grand houses, silence reigned. The silence of ruin. But silence did not last. By midday, drums of a different kind shook the ground, the roll of militia marching. French troops in blue coats, muskets gleaming, bayonets fixed. They combed the fields with dogs, their boots sinking into blood-soaked earth. Smoke still curled from the ruins of Etienne Moreau's estate when Captain Roche barked his order. Round them up, every last one. Screams split the air again, men dragged from hiding pits. Women torn from the brush, clutching children who wailed as soldiers ripped them away. Jean-Jacques, shackled and beaten, spat blood at a guard's boots. You can chain us again, but you can't chain the fire. The guard kicked him hard in the ribs. The fire dies with you. Marie-Claire stumbled beside him, wrists bound, eyes blazing with fury. She whispered to him, "Don't speak. They want to break you with your own words." Henri had not been caught yet. He crouched in the cane, watching through slits of leaves as his comrades were dragged toward the town square. His heart pounded like a drum. Each cry tore at him. His hands twitched on the machete hilt, but he knew, if he charged, they would all die in vain. By evening, the prisoners filled the square in Cap Français. A wooden platform had been raised. Chains rattled as soldiers lined them up like cattle. A magistrate in powdered wig, pale as parchment, stepped forward. His name, Judge Laforêt, a man who smiled as if justice were a personal joke. He cleared his throat. "You stand accused of rebellion, of murder, of arson. Crimes punishable by death," Jean-Jacques barked a laugh. "And slavery is not a crime?" The crowd murmured. Some white colonists hissed, others looked uneasy. Judge Laforêt's smile only widened. "Slavery," he said coldly, "is order. Without it, there is only chaos." Toussaint lifted his head, voice steady. "Then let there be chaos. Better to die in fire than live in chains," the magistrate's gavel struck. "Order, order!" But the murmurs grew louder. Black freedmen crowded at the edges of the square whispered to one another. Even poor whites, artisans, and sailors shifted uncomfortably. The spectacle was not as simple as Laforêt wished. Boukman, bandaged and bloodied, was dragged forward. His height alone dwarfed the guards who held him. His voice rolled like thunder, though pain laced every word. "You can cut me down, but my words already walk free. You can burn my body, but the fire is already lit." The magistrate's face twitched. "Enough of your curses." "Not curses," Boukman growled. "Promises." The gavel struck again. Execution at dawn, chains dragged. The prisoners were hauled toward the prison. Women wailed in the streets. Some threw scraps of food, others blessings whispered under breath. Henri watched from the shadows, his nails biting into his palms. That night inside the dark stone prison, whispers replaced the sobs. Marie-Claire leaned close to Toussaint. "If this is the end, let them remember our names." Toussaint closed his eyes. "They will. The fire will carry them." Jean-Jacques chuckled bitterly. "I'd rather carry my blade than my name." Boukman sat silent for a long time. Then softly he began to hum. The same lullaby song that had risen the night of fire. One by one voices joined. Chains rattled like drums. Outside the prison walls, passers-by paused. Some crossed themselves. Others whispered, "The rebels sing." Morning came with drums again, this time the drums of execution. The square filled, white colonists eager for blood, black freedmen forced to watch. Jean-Jacques was dragged up first. The rope swung above him. He spat at the gallows. "Hang me and 100 rise in my place," and the lever dropped. The crowd gasped. His body jerked, then stilled, the word still hanging in the air, heavier than his corpse. Next was Marie-Claire. She climbed without trembling. She looked out at the crowd, eyes burning. "Your chains will choke you one day." The rope tightened. Her cry became silence. Toussaint stepped forward, last among them. His cross still hidden at his chest, he raised his voice, clear, unbroken. "You fear us because you know the truth. The earth belongs to those who work it, not those who whip it." The magistrate shouted, "Enough!" The rope snapped taut. Only Boukman remained. The crowd leaned forward as the giant was forced onto the platform, wounded yet unbowed. He looked skyward, then down at the magistrate. "You will see me in fire, in storm, in every shadow that walks free." The axe fell, for the French feared even his hanging words. The crowd erupted, some in cheers, others in weeping silence. Smoke from the torches curled above, mingling with the memory of cane fields still smoldering on the horizon. Henri, hidden in the crowd, turned away with tears and fury carved into his face. His whisper was carried on the wind. "This is not the end. It cannot be." The rebellion had been struck down in blood, but seeds had been sown in every witness, in every cry, in every silent tear. And seeds once planted will find a way to grow. Weeks turned into months, but the smoke never truly cleared. In Cap Français, the gallows rotted under the sun, ropes still swaying like ghosts of the hanged. Children pointed at them and whispered names their parents dared not say aloud. In the markets, old women hummed lullabies with strange, twisted verses. A fragment of Boukman's chant slipped into songs sung while grinding maize. Men at docks repeated tales of a giant who laughed at bullets, who rose from the pyre and walked the fields at night. The French tried to silence it. Orders went out, "Speak not of the rebels. Forget their names." Yet forgetting proved impossible. Fire had seared memory into the soil itself. Henri became a shadow, slipping from one safe house to another, moving through the mountains where Maroons, escaped slaves, lived beyond French reach. Around campfires he told the story again and again. "They killed Jean-Jacques," he whispered, the flames painting his face with fury. "They burned Marie-Claire. They cut Boukman down. But still we breathe, and as long as one breathes, the revolt is not dead." Children stared wide-eyed, clutching sticks as if they were blades. Elders nodded, remembering the screams of that night, the glow of plantations burning. Toussaint's name, though silenced by the rope, began to sprout like a seed carried on the wind. Some whispered of visions, Toussaint walking through fire, Toussaint leading armies from the grave. Claudine's pearls, scorched in the ruin of her house, resurfaced in rumors. Some swore they were stolen by a rebel woman, turned into charms of vengeance. Others claimed they still lay buried in ash, cursed to choke whoever wore them. Letters from planters in France spoke in trembling tones. The colony trembles with fear. The blacks are restless, poisoned by songs of freedom. The uprising of August has birthed 1,000 more whispers. We live surrounded by shadows, priests thundered from pulpits. God struck down the wicked slaves. Their leaders hang, their blood feeds the soil. Learn from their folly. Yet even as sermons rang, some congregants hummed the forbidden songs under their breath. On moonless nights, drums still beat in the hills. Fires still burned in secret, not of Cain this time, but of memory. One sailor carried the tale to Jamaica, another to Charleston, another to Paris. Each telling warped it further. In Paris salons it became the barbaric insurrection. Among sailors, it became the storm of fire that no chains could hold. Among the enslaved in neighboring islands, it became hope. "Did you hear?" one woman whispered to her child in Martinique. They rose in Saint-Domingue. They fought. They burned, they sang, and for a night they were free. The magistrate Laforet, proud in his judgment, found himself a marked man in rumor. Some said Henri stalked him, blade in hand, waiting for the day. Others said Laforet's own dreams betrayed him, that he woke nightly to the sound of chains snapping, to Boukman's voice whispering in the dark. In time, the story swelled beyond truth. Boukman no longer merely a man, but a spirit who walked with storms. Jean-Jacques remembered not just as a fighter, but as a saint of vengeance. Marie-Claire as the flame itself, eyes of fire, torch in hand. And Toussaint, though dead, was whispered of as the Black Spartacus, a name carried on winds stronger than the rope that had silenced him. Legends are not born from victories alone. They are born from blood, from ash, from whispers too stubborn to die. The revolt of 1791 had not ended in the square. It had only changed shape, from flesh to fire, from voice to echo. The gallows are empty now. The fire's long since cooled. The cane has grown back, tall and green, swaying as if nothing ever happened. But the earth remembers. The soil of Saint-Domingue is heavy with ash, with blood, with vows whispered under smoke. History tells us the rebellion was crushed, that its leaders met the rope or the axe. Yet history cannot silence the cries that echoed through the night, nor the lullabies twisted into curses, nor the children who grew up hearing how their mothers and fathers burned the plantations to the ground. Chains are stronger than iron. They are forged in fear, in silence, in obedience. But chains also crack, not when struck by hammers, but when struck by courage. That night in 1791, courage was louder than muskets, hotter than fire, sharper than any blade. Still, rebellion is no clean thing. It leaves scars not only on the oppressed but on the oppressors, on the land itself, on those who lived long enough to wonder whether freedom was worth the graves it dug. And yet, what other road was left? When the whip sings every day, when names are stripped, when children are sold, when even God seems to turn his face away, what else can a man or woman do but fight? They fought, they bled, they burned, not because they believed they would win in that moment, but because they believed they had the right to try. And in that act, in that defiance, they carved their names not in stone but in fire. The question lingers, sharper than any verdict. Was justice served or merely delayed? The story of Saint-Domingue in 1791 is not just a chapter of history. It is a wound, a scar, and a warning. Fire and chains, blood and lullabies, hope and despair, all tangled in one night that changed the world. Some say the rebels were criminals, but others call them martyrs. Some say they were doomed from the start, yet their courage lit a flame that no empire could fully extinguish. And now the question is yours to carry. If you were there, in the cane fields, bound in chains, whipped and broken, would you bow your head, or would you set the night on fire? History waits for no one, but it remembers those who chose to fight. If this story gripped you, if it made you feel the heat of the flames, the weight of the chains, the trembling of the drums, then keep walking this path with us. Subscribe, share, keep the memory alive. Because forgetting is the true death. This is not just history. This is resistance. This has been the slave resistance, where the forgotten rise, where the chains speak, and where history is told in blood and fire. Until next time, remember the names and carry the flame.